Great, it's nice, so nice to be with you. I am so sorry it's still so cold in here. We have all the money for the next round of the heating system. The builders have started, they've put the gas in, and so work is imminent. But I'm sorry it's so cold. Hopefully this is, under God, the last cold winter we're going to have in St. James in the city. Amen? Amen, yes. Guys, you're so good. I'm so pleased you're still here. Do you know what I mean? It's freezing. So sorry. But it is being sorted out. I'm Jude. I think I know most people in the room, but part of the team here. Most Sunday mornings I'm at St. Mary's Wavertree, but it is really good, once a month or something, to be here with you. Now, I love that chapter from Genesis chapter 1. Thank you so much for reading that long chapter. Brilliant. But it's just incredible, isn't it? You might want to just sort of bring some of that imagery to mind as we kind of just begin thinking about it. It's not, of course, a 21st century science textbook. That's not what the genre of writing is. It's poetic narrative that is showing us the kind of form and the purposes of the world that God has created. And we see beauty and wonder. And we see the sky and the waters and the land and trees and vegetation and fruit and sun and moon and living creatures, birds and animals. And I love the throwaway line in verse 16. He also made the stars. It's incredible. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I need to be reminded of the beauty of the world. Anyone else kind of feel like in winter months, particularly? Yes, particularly, I think. And we just need to be reminded of how wonderful that we're part of something incredible and glorious and majestic. Yeah, I need to be reminded of that. And of course, we get constantly sort of hammered, don't we, by the false narratives of the world around us. This messaging that we get. We need to buy this thing or that thing, look like this or that before we are good enough. It's part of the messaging, the false narrative of the world. And each one of us, I'm sure you know this, each one of us is on a board somewhere in an advertising office somewhere in the world. You're on a board in the advertising office, and folks are targeting you to get you to buy things, buy this phone, these clothes, this thing, which you are going to get really excited about. You're going to get really excited about it. You're going to tell your mates all about it. And if you get it, then you're going to be something. But that's the false narrative of the world, isn't it? Of commercialism, at least. And even my daughter and her friends, who's only 12 years old, is just getting into skincare products. And she is on a board somewhere in an office. Can you believe it? Being targeted by people trying to get rich who make stuff on the other side of the world, who are putting wealth into the pockets of who knows who. It's crazy world that we have created. But then we read Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, which says that God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, you, me, we have been created, male and female. He created them. And so every person has this kind of unbelievable, outrageous, kind of cosmic identity made in God's image. It's amazing. That doesn't depend on iPhones or skincare products or anything else that we could buy. We are made in God's image. And if we knew that, if that kind of permeated deep into our spirits, right, if we knew it from the inside out, well, we would never think less of ourselves again. In fact, we'd probably never think less of anybody else because we'd know that they're made in God's image too, right? And we'd certainly be a lot more kind of resilient to the worldly things that come our way. Do we agree? I suspect that's probably true, isn't it? If we let that truth of who we are, made in God's image, go deep into our spirits, it's a life's journey. But we want to take hold of this text so much that it would kind of anchor us in life. It's the beginnings, Genesis, the foundations of things. Now, as Jerome has said already, today is the first Sunday in our Vision series. Ooh, Vision 2025. We've all got our own sense of vision, I think. Something about where we're going, where we think we might be going. But for the next 5 weeks, we're thinking about our vision as a whole church together. Where are we moving? Where might God be calling us as a whole church in the things that we do together? And my hope is that we've got 5 Sundays looking at different dimensions of our shared vision. It's going to be exciting. We're going to do things a little bit differently as well, so kind of get ready for that. But 5 Sundays thinking about our vision for the year. And I suppose my hope is that this is going to feel a little bit like sort of team talks, like the family kind of gathering together and kind of talking about the future. We were doing some family holiday planning as a family of the weekend, thinking about the future. And I think it was Martin Lloyd-Jones, who's a famous preacher from back in the day. He said, the Christian life is often more like a battleground than a playground. And in a battleground, people can get a bit lost at the edges. That's what happens in a battle. People get lost at the edges. And so part of what we're doing here is we're reminding one another, calling each other in to what God has called us into as a whole church. That's what we're doing, I think, over the next few weeks. And I'm particularly excited this year about our vision because 2025 happens to be, do most people know this? 2025 happens to be the 250th anniversary of this church being built. Is anybody who knows that? A good number, a good few of us. Right, brilliant. So it's the 250th anniversary of this building. It's also called the semi-quincentennial, or sometimes referred to as the bisesquicentennial, or even the sextacentennial. That's a third. No, why do you get 3 options for 250 years? It's amazing, isn't it? We're going to call it the 250th. Is that all right? We're going to call it the 250th. Right? Now, does anybody know, again, just sort of testing, the word may have traveled. Does anybody know the closest Sunday this year? So all the Sundays this year. What's the closest Sunday to the building being opened 250 years ago? Anybody know? Anybody? Well, it is the 8th of June. It's the 8th of June, which just so happens this year to be Pentecost Sunday. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Yeah, so when we celebrate the birthday of the whole church, we're also celebrating our birthday, our 250th birthday this year on the 8th, Sunday, the 8th of June. There will be cake. And we're going to have a weekend. We're actually going to have a weekend of celebration. So if you've gone off to other places, we want to invite you back to come for the 7th and the 8th of June. If you're a student and you just happen to have left Liverpool at that point, we want to invite you back because this is your church and we want to celebrate with you all that God has been doing. And actually, we're going to invite people back who've been part of the church from over the years. So we're going to have a great time. Saturday evening, we're going to have a big party. We're going to be sharing stories, and we've got celebrations on the Sunday. If it's not in your diary, can you put it in your diary? Is that all right? 7th and the 8th of June. You are invited. Come. We'd love to see you. And as you'd expect, we have a vision booklet for the year. Oh, exciting. Yes, exciting. Now, normally we have a 20-page document. It's served us quite well over the years, but apparently the younger generation don't always read the detail. Is that true? I mean, I said you love the detail, but apparently this is better. And when you read it, I think you'll agree it is better. We're going to have a look at that a little bit later at the end of the service, and you're going to get one. You're going to get one today. A little vision booklet. Just one little spoiler. On the front page there's a kind of a key verse for the year. Let the little children come to me. Matthew 19, verse 14, which you may know is also the verse on our stained glass window, which is hiding away sort of somewhere behind the screen there. A picture of Jesus and the little children. And it's this emphasis on the younger generation, the younger demographics. Jesus is welcome to them. And it's worth knowing, if you don't know this already, it's worth knowing that this church, back through the years, through the decades, through the generations, has got incredible stories of God blessing young people. So in the 1800s, there was 1,000 children in the Sunday school. I'm not quite sure how they made that work, but there were 1,000 children in the Sunday school. And on a Sunday, it would all be packed down here. People would be sitting in the galleries around there. And then where the loft is, where we built the loft up there was actually a second-tier gallery. And people from all around would be coming over. You'd have children. It would be wild. Children and young people running all over the place. 1,000 kids in the Sunday school. These deep tracks of God blessing young people. Amen. And then the church was shut for 40 years. They stopped engaging with young people, and guess what? The church closed. That's another story. But when the building reopened in 2010, the bishop of the time, Bishop James Jones, said he wanted to open a church that would be here for the next generation. He even called it the missing generation. The young people who were often neglected, overlooked, didn't find their place in church life, whether that's young adults or university students or kids or youth or whatever it is. You want to fight, be a church that's going to be a blessing to the next generation. In fact, more than that, be a prophetic kind of sign to other churches that actually we need to be handing on the baton of faith to those who come after us. Amen? Of course we do. How could we even forget? How could the church forget that was such a priority for us? And we find ourselves now in a moment, I think, where God is renewing his church up and down the country. And it's incredibly exciting. What better kind of thing to dive in and be part of? And we're playing our part in that here in Liverpool, resourcing the next generation. Let the little children come to me. And just to encourage you, if you are a committed member of this church, I know you're committed because you're sitting there in a freezing cold room, but if you're a committed member of this church, then you have been part of making this story a reality, whether it's church planting or children's and families work, parents and toddlers, youth and schools, university students, adults, Alpha, Justice, Liverpool Citizens, sending people out to other ministries, Bethan going off, spend time still here, but off to serve and work with New Wine. Amazing. So many people have come through. You're part of making this a reality. And I think, should we just give one another a clap and just recognize God's goodness amongst us? Come on, warm ourselves up with a little clap there. Warm ourselves up. So that's kind of a vision, and you're going to be able to look at the booklet, and the booklet is going to kind of steer us with some specifics about what we think God is calling us into in the year ahead. A chance for that a bit later. What I would love to do, I kind of want to do three things. I would love to just dig into that text from Genesis chapter 1. Kind of grab hold of some stuff, particularly around this image of God thing and how that helps us when we think about vision for the year ahead. I want to do that first. And then secondly, I'd love to just create a bit of space for us to chat with those around us. How is God speaking to us in this at the start of the year? And then thirdly, I'd like us just to pray for each other and to wait on God. Is that okay? That's where we're headed. Genesis, chat, pray. Something. Cool. So you might want to have that text open in front of you from Genesis chapter 1. And particularly we're going to focus in on this picture of being made in God's image. And just to say, as we ready ourselves for this, I just really feel today, that God is going to put a fresh calling to his church on some people's hearts today. I just wonder whether we could be expectant for that. We're all sort of busy doing life and X, Y, Z, but I just sense that God is going to call some of us back to serving in his church today. But anyway, let's see where God leads us. Genesis chapter 1. So here we are. We know that God's image, of course, it's about being made in God's image. Of course, it's about identity and value and worth. But in this text, it seems to be coupled to purpose. We are given a key role in enabling God's purposes to be fulfilled. Let's have a look. Verses 27 and 28, which we might have on the screen in a sec. God creates man and woman, us in his image, and God blesses them and says, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, over every living creature that moves on the ground. Subdue the earth. Apparently, the earth the world as we know it is not going to fulfill the potential that God has for it unless we, people, make it flourish. This seems to be the economy, the order of God. The world isn't going to fulfill its potential unless we enable it to flourish. And this word subdue, it's quite a wide-ranging Greek word that's here, but it's not a heavy word. This is about oversight, and it's about caring. It's about kind of marshalling the makeup, the resources of the world, so that, verse 31, things are very good. They're good, all through the text. Until the end, human beings turn up, but suddenly they can become very good. And so if you didn't know it, you are stewards, if you like. There might be one way of phrasing it. Stewards or guardians, co-workers with God, called to make life very good. Stewards. Called as stewards. Called as stewards. So that takes in, I think it takes in everything. It takes in farming. It takes in construction. It takes in engineering. It takes in education. It takes in social services and businesses. It takes in government and health and arts and music and kind of sport and leisure and family life and as much as you can think of. And it's our first commission. Called as stewards. It's pretty cool. We're not here by accident. It's not random. It's not just about building ourselves up. God has a purpose for us. And it seems to me, I don't know if you agree, but it seems to me that God then gives us stuff to help us to fulfill that purpose, our role as stewards. I want to think, what has God given us to help us to fulfill that role? Well, let's have a little think about it. I've got a little box here. What have we got in the box? Let's see what's here. Well, the first thing God's given, I think, is God's given us some time, right? Anyone got some time? God's given us some time. Don't run away with these things, by the way. God's given us some time. That's cool. God's given us some time. I think God's also given us a bit of creativity. God's given us a bit of creativity. We've got some pens and some paper. Henry, I don't know whether you're very artistic, but please don't run off with them. God's given us some creativity. He's given us creativity to think and to create and to make stuff. God's also given us He's given us our health and our physicality. Here's a dumbbell. Our health and our physicality to exercise and to enjoy the world that we live in. He's given us seed of the earth. Some seed of the earth. There's some Scott's Project. Fan of Projects? Yeah? Not so much, okay. There we go, seed of the earth. He's also given us some natural materials to make stuff, like a jumper or some electronic product, a tablet. I'm watching. To make stuff. That's really cool. We can make stuff. He's given us friendships and families. Picture of me and my brother. He's given us friendships and family, people to kind of walk the road out with, to go on the journey. He's given us minds, mathematical methods in the physical science, the language of creation. Anyone else a mathematician? Friends? No mathematicians around here? Math. He's given us minds, brains to think, to imagine what could be possible, to explore and to think about how to marshal, to steward the world that God has given us. Ooh. Who's trustworthy? Lydia, you are so trustworthy. Lydia, he's given us some money. Anybody got any money? Not very much at the moment, but he's given us some money to do things with. Guys, I'm collecting these back at the end. He's given us lots of stuff, lots of gifts with which we can steward the world that God has made. And I don't know if you can relate to this at all, but when we get stuff, when we get time and money and creativity and gifts, and there's a temptation to it sort of comes to us, and there's a temptation to sort of go a little bit like this. yes, I'm now going to keep those gifts for myself. And they're going to build me up and make me feel better about myself. And I'm going to spend them and use them for me and the things that I want to do. Anyone relate to that at all? Not just me? Yes, that does. Does that happen? Yes, that does happen. And it happens a lot in the world that we live in, where we're encouraged to think like that. Me first, the false narrative of the world. But I think that when God gives us these gifts, because they're all from God, right? They're all gifts from God. I think when God gives us these gifts, actually I think what God wants to do is he wants us to have our hands slightly more open. Yeah? It's not really ours. We're kind of looking after them and we have a purpose to fulfill. So he wants us to keep our hands open and to think about how can we use the things that we've given us to fulfill the purpose for which we are called. Does that make sense? Fine, great. That's kind of helpful. I can kind of run with that. So we get the gifts, we use the gifts to steward the world that God has given. Simple. But not very simple, right? Because we know, because living life with hands open is difficult. We naturally go like this. Partly, I think, because we're selfish. Partly because there are kind of life pressures that come at us. Partly, I think, because we kind of live in these little bubbles where we don't necessarily know the needs that are over there or perhaps what we could be doing. But I also think we can get into a little bit of a muddle with our theology on this sometimes. I don't know whether this relates to this. I'm not sure whether you can get me on this. But I think see if this relates. You might say, well, okay, Jude, this is the first page of the Bible. And I know that the life in the story in the Bible seems to start well, right? It's good. God creates a good creation. So I know it starts well. Things are good. And I know at the end of the Bible story, the future, we have new heavens and new earth. And, everything is going to be okay. It is going to be okay. It is going to work out well. I know that. But we sort of live in this sort of middle bit. And there's almost like a bit of a chasm where life doesn't work how I would like it to work. And people get hurt. And there's mess. And there's brokenness around, right? There's tragedy. There's disappointment. Lots of it in this middle space, the space that we live now. Isn't it enough to kind of just hang in there? Do you know what I mean? Isn't it enough to just sort of hang in there, to sort of make the best of life and, just to hang on in there until God sorts it out in the end? Enjoy my lot in life. Get through. Is that a fair question? I don't know, maybe. What did Jesus say? What did Jesus say? Let's think. What did Jesus say? I seem to remember Jesus telling a parable. A parable about the talents. Anyone else remember the parable of the talents? It's in Matthew 25. He's talking about the kingdom of heaven, and that's the life under God today. And the parable starts in verse 14 with this line. It starts like this. Jesus says, "For it will be, kingdom of heaven, like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted them with his property." Entrusted with his property. So somebody's given us stuff. It's God. Someone's given us stuff. And 5 talents are given to one person. And 2 talents are given to someone else. And then another talent is given to somebody else over here. And then the man in the story, in the parable, the man returns and he calls people to account. He says, "How have you used the stuff that I've given you?" And this is what the master in the parable says to those who've used things well. And it's actually repeated twice. It's the exact same words repeated twice in the parable. And if you know if something's repeated in the Bible, it's pretty important. So this is what the master says to those who've used the things well. He says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a little, and I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." I'm going to say it twice because it's in the text. Twice. Well done, good and faithful servant. Regardless of whether it's 1, 5, or 2, you've been faithful over a little, and I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And so those who've used the things well, it's good news. You're going to get loads more. You're going to get loads more. But those that haven't, even what they have will be taken from them. Is this landing? This is landing, right? We know what Jesus is talking about here, right? So what about the words of Jesus in Luke chapter 16? Jesus says this. He says, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Whoever's dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. If you haven't been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches? If you haven't been trustworthy with somebody else's property, who's going to give you property of your own?" It's kind of a little scary and serious, but it's also kind of exciting at the same time. Anyone else kind of relate to that? So it was always God's plan for us to steward the world. And God's put things in our hands, time, money, gifts. And they're kind of his things anyway, because he made them. And he's given them to us to make the world a better place. But there seems to be this other little dimension going on, because he also seems to have given them to us because he wants to prepare us for having even more. And that's really exciting. That is really exciting. You know, no matter how good that thing is that we've got right now, it is nothing compared to what's coming. And we think it's really important. Like, how can I live without? That thing. How can I give it up? What's coming is better. And this is almost like a moment where we're sort of learning to step into this identity as stewards, called as stewards, but called as stewards for all eternity. And now is almost like what does the Apostle Paul say? Almost like the embryo, the training ground, the beginning of this wonderful eternal future, if we believe it. Probably to the extent to which we believe it is the extent to which we'll be open-handed, I guess. So serious, but it's quite exciting. I don't know about anybody else, but I want to be that good and faithful servant. It's flipping hard sometimes, but I want to be that good and faithful servant. I believe it. So this probably lands in a whole load of different ways, right? Because being stewards of the world means a lot. But I would love to kind of narrow us in this moment, to be thinking about what it means to be part of the church here. And as we think about our journey into the year ahead, Vision 2025, what is God calling us to? What sort of things is God putting on your heart for the year ahead? What has God put in your hands that you could use within the wider church? You know, the church seems to be the vehicle, the movement of the gospel, of God's movement of salvation. As part of that, stewardship is about using our things in our church together. So we're going to explore that together. So we've got 3 questions on the screen called as stewards for all eternity. There you go, the game. We've got 3 questions. And I don't know, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to read that there, but what I'd love you to do, so we're just going to take a few minutes now. This is just to kind of get us going. We're on a journey of the next 5 weeks, right? Vision, what's our role in the vision? How do we all join in? This is just to get us going. So there's 3 questions there. So the 3 questions are, what role do you currently have in our church? How would you describe your role in the church family at the moment? Number 1. Number 2, what has God put in your hands which you can use to bless one another in the wider life of the church? That's number 2. What's God put in your hands? And number 3, how might God be calling you? What sort of things is God calling you into in the year ahead? How might God be calling you to participate in our vision as a church? Is that okay? So we're just going to chat to each other. So can I suggest we go for 3s? Maybe 4s. If we go for 5s, you may not all get a chance to chat. So 2s, 3s, 4s. Is that cool? And maybe just move your chairs around. Grab the person you came with. If you see someone sitting on their own, go and sit next to them. 3 questions. We're not going to spend long on this, guys, because we're going to pray too. So let's do it. Let's move around. Let's have a chat.